The Storm of Sun and Moon. Written by Eternal Love Song. Read by Arashi. They met in the midst of a storm. There was a heavy curtain of rain between them, and the thick clouds covering the sky obscured both the sun and the moon, allowing them to meet on equal footing. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the whispers of wind sprites and the crystalline chimes that rolled off the lichen's fur. To one side was the Summer Queen, dancing through the rain with a careless mien, leaving flowers blooming in her steps and perfuming the air with a heavy floral scent. The Summer Queen was lithe, with sun-kissed skin and silver hair that gleamed like metal beneath the right light. It was rare to catch her without an entourage, and the only indication that she was not alone was the way the trees often stretched towards her, no matter to which side of them she moved. On the other side was the Winter King. He approached with measured steps, heralding a deep chill and wearing a grin that nearly split his face in half. He was pale as moonlight, with hair like shadows and eyes like jewels. Behind him was a wraith of bone and leathery rings, form half hidden beneath a cloak that was clenched tightly in an old, wrinkled hand, and a succubus that hovered over his shoulder, form equally hidden. Both stayed back as the king approached. The Winter King walked forward until he caught the queen's hand, thin tendrils of frost traveling up her wrist from his touch. Rather than stop her dance, however, the king simply joined in, twirling her around and around in his arms as the slight frost he brought began to melt and her skin heated up in his hands. "Hello, my queen!" The Summer Queen laughed, the sound like bells and drum beats, the music making a mockery of the words. Your queen, as if I belonged to anything but the sun, and the spring and the divine light of the sun." The heat that radiated from her body was crashing against his cold, stirring the winds and agitating the storm. Soon there would be tornadoes dancing with her, with him, and crowding them out of their chosen meeting place. For now, though, it was just the two of them. The king tightened his grip on her hand, sending a ripple of frost along her arm, before he swung her from one hand to the next. "Oops, I slipped," he said, with his own laugh, one that echoed deeper and darker than her own. "You never slip, Kokichi." The Winter King began to glide beside her, his icy steps freezing the flowers as they bloomed beneath her feet, until they were twirling in a frozen garden. "And you never lie. Fairies can't lie," she told him, tapping his nose as if to scold him. "Exactly," he agreed. "You are mine, the way the summer belongs to fall, belongs to winter, belongs to me, the way winter feeds into the spring, into the summer, into you." "Then how did you slip?" she asked with a sharp glare. He only laughed again, sharp and mischievous. "How indeed, Angie?" The jewels of his eyes gleamed in the little light they had, as bright as her blue ones were hard. When he did not relent, she did, slowing their steps until they were doing little more than simply swaying in a storm. "Why did you come?" she asked him. "Why did you call? If not for war, if not for death, the queen has no need of you." Kokichi abruptly pulled her in close, holding her tight, with her back to his chest. She shivered at the sharp chill of his body, and gasped when he swung her out and into a dip. She braced for impact, the wicked grin on his face, making her sure that he would drop her, even though he had never before. "What makes you think this isn't war?" he asked her. "And here you've put yourself directly into my arms." The trees began to shake and sway, moving contrary to the wind, a threat that would be easy to recognize. But he didn't take his eyes off her. He held her gaze long enough that she began to worry this would be war, that he was finally here to take her head, the way their kin had always danced and bled on ballrooms and battlefields alike. Slowly, he pulled her back to her feet, and the fear that had collided within her began to abate. "I would never do something like that to you, Angie. You're my favorite queen, you know. Your favorite," she repeated, pulling out his arms. "Your queen. You grow greedy, Kokichi, always trying to claim." "Oh?" He gave her a wide-eyed look, the kind that mortals always fell for, and Faye never would. Am I really the greedy one here?" Angie ignored that jab and the echo of truth that it carried. Instead, she simply asked him, "To what do I owe this meeting, Winter King?" His smile brightened, the mischief sliding off his face, as if it was never there. "I'm glad that you asked. I've decided that these wars between us should be put to an end." "Oh?" She raised an eyebrow at him, but she refused to add anything before she heard more of what he would say. The ire between her court and his was not so easy to smother, and neither did the two of them share a harmony that would make such a thing likely. The push and pull between them was as natural as the passing of the seasons, the discord of fire and ice, the dominance of the sky by the sun and the moon. They could coexist, but one always came out on top, and things would always shift to favor one of the other sooner than later. Kokichi reached out for a lock of her hair, twirling it lightly around his finger as he spoke. "Don't you tire of this battle for dominance?" he asked her. "Wouldn't you rather a chance to rest and relax, like the rest of your court is so fond of doing? Do not assume this is how a queen thinks or feels," Angie replied. "It was a question, not an assumption." He told her. He looked far too giddy for her liking. "I, for once, think harmony would suit us more than strife." She crossed her arms, standing perfectly still for the first time since they had entered the clearing. "There is no harmony for us, Kokichi. Only temporary rest. Only eclipses and storms. That's where you are wrong," he told her, tugging on the lock of hair he still held. Angie tossed her head to the side, causing it to fall from his hands. "There can be no trust, and therefore there can be no peace. I want peace," Kokichi said. She was stunned that he had actually made a definitive statement, something that could not be twisted into a game of truth and lies, could not be questioned, for it was too short and straightforward to have shadows to hide in. "You?" she repeated slowly. "Want peace? Do you not?" Angie didn't answer that. She spun on her heel and began to pace around him. Kokichi only grinned and leaned back, leaning his heel upon one of the frozen flowers and causing the ice to rise up until there was a throne beneath him for him to sit on. He rested his face in one hand as he watched her, silent but clearly amused. "Tell me," she said, leaving her words too open for him to glean anything of her desires. Kokichi sighed. "Every spring we battle, every fall we war. We fight over the mortals, the land, and everything in between. There are times when we should come together without the worry for our cold and heat clashing. There are lines we could draw that would keep both sides from reaching so far. They would break," she says immediately. Wisely, she did not say who would break them. "Perhaps they break," he said. "Perhaps the sky will fall, and our blood will feed the land, and our hearts be plucked out of our chest. Perhaps there's no reason to abstain, Angie." Angie is quiet as she thinks, as the pros and cons tumble over and over in her mind. She stretches her foot out over the frozen flowers and causes them to break free of the thin layer of ice holding them captive, until there is a perfect circle around her in full bloom. At the edge of it, mushrooms begin to spring, until there is a tiny ring of them. When she speaks, It is lower than the howl of the wind and the song of the trees. Better regents than us have tried, and worse regents have failed, he says. She stared at him in silence, her in her fairy's ring, and him atop his throne. Ultimately, he was the one to rise and come to her. He was the one to hold out his hand, just outside her perfect, protected circle. Time will not remember us for repeating an old dance, he told her. No, time would not. She could trace the line of predecessors, but she could not remember them. They had no titles to replace their names, no pictures to stand in for their forms. They had no graves, or stars, or trees to mark their passing. Was she content to be a number without a name, forgotten by her successor within a century of her passing? You think you have new steps? She asked him, meeting his eyes. I think anything can be new, if it's a roaring success or a glory disaster. He told her. A glorious disaster. Did Angie crave glory? She placed her hand in his own and allowed him to pull her from the circle and into his arms. This time, he was the one to lead into a dance. Shall we stay until the storm takes us? He asked. Angie thought that it meant it in both ways, until the tornado swept them off their feet, and until whatever peace they thought they could create came tumbling down around them. We'll stay, she told him. The Queen has danced in worse storms. She wasn't completely sure if that was true, allowing her words to dance on the edge of lie and truth, the way they would now dance a line of war and peace.